Uh-oh.
In her last two fights. Good way hitting him from that way down.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Continuation to a story talked about in my previous video per a tweet from Michael Benson. Sebastian Fundora will reportedly vacate or be stripped of his WBO junior middleweight world title if he does fight Errol Spence next, rather than Terence Crawford as ordered. It's claimed Fundora versus Spence in October would be for just Fundora's WBC, which I talked about, and Crawford versus Madrimov in August be for Madrimov's WBA and the newly vacated WBO. The question has arisen that if both guys are otherwise preoccupied, engaged with other fights, with other fighters, is it right to strip Sebastian Fundora? Veteran boxing scribe Ryan O'Hara said, Crawford is fighting Madrimov, so we're just gonna strip Fundora for no reason? This is why I can't stand the sanctioning bodies. Just dump them all and start from scratch.
Is it fair to strip Sebastian Fundora in this situation?
I think it is. I think it is because of what the situation was before we got here. Before we got to the point where Crawford's fighting Madrimov and Sebastian's fighting Spence, I actually think it does make sense to strip Sebastian because you have to remember, Sampson wasn't going to make that fight. Even though Sebastian Fundora was under orders to fight Crawford next because Crawford's is mandatory, Sampson didn't want to make that fight. Sampson said they wanted to do a Spence fight and Crawford would have to wait.
That's what he said.
So when a fighter, Terence Crawford for example, becomes an undisputed champion, the WBO has a designation they award to such a fighter in such a situation. WBO Super Champion status that allows you to move up in weight and become the mandatory challenger with immediate effect for the WBO champion at that given weight. That's how he was able to fight Jeff Horn upon moving up to 147. That's how Usyk was Anthony Joshua's mandatory upon moving up to heavyweight. It's been around a while.
It isn't new. It isn't unusual.
So, Crawford, Sebastian's mandatory challenger. But Sebastian's promoter, Samson Lukowicz, he didn't want to make the fight. He said Crawford's going to have to wait because he wants to make a Spence fight. So what you have to ask yourself is it fair that Crawford would have had to wait for his title shot, presumably until next year, so that Spence, the guy that he beat, could get a shot ahead of him?
Is that fair?
Because Sampson wasn't going to make the Crawford fight for later on this year. So you have a fighter who's not medically cleared to fight until sometime in the fall.
Sebastian.
Due to the injuries that he sustained in the Tim Tszyu fight.
Right.
You would have had to wait till the fall for this guy. And with this guy's promoter saying, in the fall when he comes back, he's not fighting you anyway.
What he wants is for his guy to fight Spence. Then he goes from saying that he wants his guy to fight Spence to he's going to give Tim Tszyu a rematch.
Seems that it was never Sampson's intention to put his fighter in the ring with Terence Crawford at any point this year.
It was either going to be Spence or Tim Tszyu, so what was Crawford supposed to do?
One of the main hang-ups that people have with Terence Crawford is that in recent years he just hasn't been active enough. He's been averaging one fight a year for something like 2 or 3 years. They would like for that fighter to be more active. Well, he can't do that if he's waiting around for a title shot that Samson Lukowicz doesn't want to give him.
Bottom line.
I don't think it's wrong for the WBO to strip Sebastian Fundora in this situation because of your inability and unwillingness to face Terence Crawford, who was already your mandatory challenger before the Madrimov fight got made and before your Spence fight got made.
I don't think it's wrong.
It's nowhere near as convoluted as it sounds. In a nutshell, Sebastian wasn't going to fight Crawford at any point this year, so they're right to strip him.
The belt should go to Crawford.
That would make Crawford versus Madrimov for 2 alphabet titles and not just one, and at least theoretically, that would bring Terence Crawford that much closer to becoming a 3-time undisputed champion, that he would be just 2 fights away from becoming an undisputed champion at another weight.
Not against that.
And what about the Canelo fight?
Well, obviously, if His Excellency Turki Al-Sheikh and both teams, Team Canelo, Team Crawford, can make a fight between them, that's an even bigger engagement.
But it isn't made yet. So in the in-between time, if Crawford can fight for 2 alphabet titles and not just 1, and if this does lay the foundation, the groundwork, for another undisputed run, no, I'm not against that.
No.
It's fair. It's fair that the WBO is stripping Sebastian because Sebastian wasn't going to fight him at any point this year. And who do you think deserves a shot at 2 alphabet titles more? Terence Crawford or Errol Spence?
You strip Sebastian, it's to ensure that Terence gets his shot.
If you don't strip Sebastian, what? Errol should get a shot at 2 alphabet titles, coming right off that demoralizing loss. What? That makes more sense.
No.
Yeah, I understand. The alphabet organizations, the sanctioning bodies, give us enough reasons to complain. But in this situation, I think the WBO are doing the right thing.
They see what's going on, the manipulation behind the scenes, the chicanery, and they're holding to their mandate.
They know what Sampson wants to do and why Errol Spence Jr. just happened to be ringside for the fight. They know what's going on.
You say that, well, Crawford's fighting in August.
Why should they strip Sebastian if Crawford's fighting in August?
That's the argument.
The response: Crawford is only fighting in August because you couldn't fight him. Crawford fighting in August doesn't stop him from being your WBO mandatory challenger.
He's a WBO super champion, and that designation makes him your problem.
Your next fight is supposed to be him. Him fighting in August, that doesn't even come into it because after he fights, if he wins, you're supposed to fight him right after that. And you're not doing that. You're fighting Spence.
You confirmed it yesterday.
You made a deal. You made a deal to fight Spence, and if you're fighting Spence, you're not fighting Crawford. So, any way you look at this, the WBO is right to strip him.
They're doing the right thing.
Men's Bridgerweight News, I'm sure that you've heard by now that Lawrence Okolie went into Poland and completely destroyed, he washed, then reigning champion Lukas Rozanski, then unbeaten, in just 1 round, 3 knockdowns. What seems to have been working for Lawrence is his size, his length, and his movement. His movement in particular. Lawrence has often been accused of holding too much in a fight.
Yeah.
Too many clinches.
Yeah.
I didn't think he was going to win. Saw my prediction video, heard what I said. I thought Lawrence was going to go into Poland, and I thought that he was going to get knocked out himself. That's what I thought, because Lukas, he is a strong puncher, that if he can get inside and he can get off punches, he's quite lethal. Lawrence made it very difficult to do that because he's so much taller, so much longer, and more importantly, he was moving, giving himself room to throw, to get full extension on his jab and his straight.
Tall guy with long arms needs room to work, and Lawrence gave himself that room by moving around, thereby making it difficult for Lukas to get close to him, because he has to. He's the shortest, stumpiest, stockier fighter.
Very fleet of foot Lawrence Okolie, just navigating that ring and getting those straight punches out there. Several right hands, very big ones. Having room to work and having room to throw them made all the difference. I was skeptical as to whether or not Joe Gallagher being in his corner would make a difference, but it appears that it did.
In tandem with moving up in weight, there was talk that Lawrence, boiling down to cruiserweight, it was taking something off his punch resistance. This fight, at bridgerweight, 20 pounds heavier, 24.
Something like that. Maybe Lawrence didn't feel as depleted, didn't feel as drained, making bridgerweight instead of cruiserweight. Now,
They still don't accept the bridgerweight division as a legitimate division.
you could look at this as a pit stop for Lawrence Okolie en route to the land of the giants, en route to the heavyweight division. But some are already delegitimizing Lawrence's claim as being a 2-division champion because they don't feel the bridgerweight division is a legitimate division. I won't deprive him of his plaudits. I won't deprive him of his credit myself because I didn't think he was going to win, and he did.
So he gets full credit from me. He is a 2-division champion. He has beaten 2 world champions. He beat Krzysztof Blavatsky for the WBO and Lukas Rozanski for the WBC.
You gonna put him on your pound-for-pound list?
No.
For putting Lawrence Okolie, now a 2-division champion, on a pound-for-pound list, you could easily put Junto Nakatani, a 3-division champion, Kosei Tanaka, a 4-division champion, on your pound-for-pound list for putting Lawrence there. So he's not quite there yet, but he does get full credit from me because, as stated, I thought things was going to go sideways. I thought he was going to get knocked out in Poland. He didn't.
The sauce.
Does this make Lawrence Okolie an undisputed lineal bridgerweight champion? Is that what that is? Because the WBO doesn't have a bridgerweight champion, and neither does the IBF.
The WBA does.
Evgeny Tishenko of Russia is the reigning WBA bridgerweight champion, or junior heavy, super cruiser, whatever the fuck you want to call it. They do have a version of a title at this weight. So for Lawrence, theoretically, to become this division's undisputed champion, he would have to go through that guy. However, that undisputed claim would be weaker than, say,
Usyk's.
Canelo's, because there are not 4 alphabet organizations that recognize and thereby legitimize this division. There are only 2, the WBC and the WBA. Thus, going undisputed at bridgerweight or super cruiser, it's a lot easier than going undisputed somewhere else, like heavyweight or super middle, light heavyweight.
There aren't as many organizations that recognize this division, thus there are not that many champions. It's easier to do.
He'd get half the credit. He'd get half the credit for becoming an undisputed champion at this weight because there are only half the champions.
Half the belts to win.
I don't even know how Ring Magazine feels about the bridgerweight division or the super cruiserweight division. I don't know how they feel about it.
Should he stay there?
Yeah, I think he should stay there for at least 1 or 2 more fights. You know, you go after the Tishenko guy, win that other belt, and maybe you have a defense.
Why? There's nobody there.
Because he needs to acclimate. Because he needs to get used to fighting under these conditions and fighting with the added weight. Acclimating. The heavyweight division isn't going anywhere. It's still going to be there. For the time being, he needs to get used to this weight.
He's a lot fleshier than he was at cruiserweight.
But he was also more entertaining. That's the most entertaining Lawrence Okolie fight I've ever seen. In fact, I'd go as far as saying as that's the best I've ever seen him. So as long as he's moving around and giving himself room to work, room to throw, he can generate the power he needs to get these guys out of there.
This is the first semblance of success that Lawrence Okolie has had since parting ways with Matchroom to go over to Boxer. Ben Shalom was there, and I think that was good too.
There to provide Lawrence moral support ringside while he is in hostile territory fighting for this title. This doesn't exactly make him the face of boxing for Sky Sports, not necessarily, but it's good. It is good.
Ben has yet to deliver on that promise.
And he still has yet to turn Lawrence Okolie into a domestic draw in the United Kingdom. Bottom line, there's more work needs doing.
But this is good.
And I personally feel Lawrence does deserve credit, because I thought he was going to go over there and get knocked out. Congratulations! Upstairs at heavyweight, former WBC heavyweight champion Deontay Wilder says, "My aggression is off the charts," ahead of his upcoming fight with Zhilei Chang, Chinese danger man Zhilei Chang, who seems to outweigh Deontay by quite a bit.
Oh yeah, Deontay Wilder's plenty tall, plenty long in terms of physical dimensions, but in terms of weight,
He's actually a very thin heavyweight. The heavy-hitting stars both lost to New Zealand's Joseph Parkier in their last fights, and now they meet as part of Frank Warren versus Eddie Hearn's promotional 5 vs. 5 show. It's been a real fun camp, real exciting. My focus has been on point. My mindset has been on point. My aggression has been off the charts, and I'm ready to go. Wilder said on Instagram, "I could say a lot of things, but on June 1st, it's gonna be the revealing, and everyone's gonna be the witness. I feel like I'm ready. I sound and look like I'm ready in all aspects of it." The 6'7" Wilder is up against the 6'6" Zhilei Chang. Wilder has knocked out 42 of the 43 victims. The Chinese puncher has stopped 21 of 26.
You know, it still stands out to me that Wilder wasn't adamant after he lost to Joseph Parker, that he wasn't adamant that he wanted a rematch, that he would like to run it back. What, you wanted them to run it back? No, actually I didn't. I didn't see a precedence for a rematch because the fight was so lopsided. But what stands out is Wilder didn't want one either. One would think that if you think Joseph is an ordinary fighter, just an ordinary guy, you'd want to right that wrong. You would have wanted to fight him again. At no point after that fight did I see Wilder advocate for a rematch.
Wilder's 38. Keen to get back into the heavyweight mix and among the biggest fights. An impressive victory over the big southpaw would do that. "It's been a long journey for me, and I had to sit back and take a little breather," Wilder said. "I can't wait. I've got to go back and get what's mine. I'm not afraid of death. Look at my occupation. We risk our lives for other people's entertainment. And that's just point blank, period. There's no other business like this. Whether the athlete risks his life for his money, blood, sweat, and tears."
Oh, very theatrical.
Still, it stands out that Wilder didn't want that rematch. I'm not proposing that they should have had one. I'm just saying that it stands out that he didn't want one either. So what does that say about his fighting spirit, the fire in his belly? Is there any left?
It's a legitimate question.
I guess another way to look at it is Wilder could have retired off that loss. He could have retired off that loss to Joseph Parker, but he didn't. So there's that to consider.
He wants to keep fighting.
But yet another way to look at it is when you have Turki Al-Sheikh offering you all this money to keep fighting, maybe that's what's keeping you in the game. The money, not so much as the passion or the fighting spirit, but the money.
It's not a good enough reason to keep fighting.
This is not the kind of occupation you can do effectively if you don't want to be there, if you don't want to do it. This is not like punching in a clock and going through the motions and it don't cost you something. This is the kind of occupation where you have to love what you do or you're not going to do it right.
Can Wilder win this fight?
I am not a fan of Deontay Wilder, nor have I ever been. So when I look at this, I look at it objectively. He does have a chance. He has a chance because Zhang is a bigger target than Joseph Parker. Joseph Parker, when he fought Wilder, was very busy, very prolific in a round, pushing Wilder back and throwing punches in bunches. And bending at the waist and knees made him a tricky target.
Hard to hit.
Wilder didn't want to let his right hand go because he didn't have the time and the space to let it go. He wants to set it up. Joseph's not giving you a chance to do that, where Zhang, comparatively, not only is he a bigger target, but he's not as busy within a round.
He doesn't throw as many punches.
And he's more upright, and he's a southpaw. We all know what the southpaw killer is. The southpaw killer is the straight right hand. And what's Wilder's money punch?
The straight right hand.
The straight right hand. So there is an avenue of opportunity there, an avenue for the victory. That's what's working for Wilder. What's working against him is I'm not convinced he can take a solid shot from Zhang.
I'm not.
There's a lot of power and a lot of weight behind Zhang's straight left hand.
If that gets in, I'm not sure that Wilder can take it.
Zhang is a bit of a counterpuncher, comes forward in that high guard, and if he catches Wilder shooting his jab, shooting his left,
He can counter with his own.
you draw Wilder's lead to counter with your backhand. Zhang can do that. Straight left hand down the pipe, and down goes Wilder, I think, if the punch gets in.
Wilder's been doing road work.
He never used to do road work before. Deontay Wilder didn't used to do road work, didn't used to skip rope. Nothing for his cardio, which would explain why, in spite of his athletic physique, he had a very poor engine and a poor work rate. Now at 38, he's looking to improve upon those things, though it may be too little and too late, as both guys have the kind of power to where they can end this fight at any moment with a single punch.
It's tricky.
I don't think most people like Wilder's chances in this fight. I think most people look at Zhang, his size, his punching power, and how Wilder looked in his last fight, and they don't like his chances. But does he have an avenue to win? He does.
He does stand a chance. You may not like his chances, and I don't either, but he does have a chance.
It's just a question of letting the right hand go, letting it go in all the ways you didn't let it go in your last fight. You may yet get the opportunity, but will that be enough?